The salt-laced wind, a familiar whisper against the ancient stones of Oakhaven, was the first thing Elara noticed. It carried the scent of brine and distant pine, a balm to her city-weary soul. She stepped out of her slightly dented hatchback, the key to her new life heavy in her palm, and gazed up at the building that was now hers. It was an old fisherman's cottage, perched at the edge of the harbor, its weathered gray shingles softened by generations of sea spray. A crooked sign, faded almost beyond recognition, still bore the faint outline of a ship and the words "The Salty Siren." Elara's vision was grander, though no less rooted in Oakhaven's quiet charm, a bookstore, with a small, sun-drenched nook for coffee and quiet contemplation. She would call it the Binding Tide. For years, Elara had dreamt of this, of escaping the relentless hum of the city, the sterile glow of office lights, and the polite but distant relationships that seemed to define her existence there. A quiet yearning had grown within her, a hunger for something real, something rooted. When the opportunity arose to purchase this forgotten little cottage in a town she'd only ever seen in postcards, she hadn't hesitated. It felt less like a decision and more like fate. The door groaned open, protesting its long slumber, and Elara stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating cobwebs like forgotten lace. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and distant wood smoke, a fragrance that spoke of history and untold stories. It was perfect. Utterly, beautifully, perfectly daunting. Her first week in Oakhaven was a blur of unpacking boxes, sweeping away decades of dust, and making endless lists. The town itself was a revelation. It wasn't just picturesque, it hummed with a gentle, understated life. Fishermen mended nets by the docks, their voices low and melodic. Children chased gulls along the pebbled beach, their laughter carried on the wind. The baker, a stout woman with flour perpetually dusting her apron, knew Elara's coffee order by the second day. The postman, a cheerful man named Silas, already called her Miss Elara and promised to keep an eye out for any interesting old books that might come his way. Elara found herself falling in love with the rhythm of Oakhaven, a rhythm dictated by the tides and the sun, not by deadlines and traffic lights. She spent her evenings on the small, rickety porch of her cottage, watching the fishing boats return, their lights twinkling like fallen stars on the dark water. She listened to the sea, its constant ebb and flow, and felt a quiet understanding settle in her heart. This was where she belonged. There was, however, one significant hurdle to her dream. The cottage was old. Charmingly old, yes, but also structurally. The floorboards sang a symphony of creaks, the ancient fireplace looked more decorative than functional, and the small attached shed, which she envisioned as a cozy reading nook, leaned precariously to one side. A local carpenter was clearly needed, and soon. Elara had asked around. Silas, the postman, had recommended a man named Finn. "Finn O'Connell," he'd said, a twinkle in his eye. "Finest woodworker in all of Oakhaven. A bit of a quiet sort, but good as gold. His workshop's down by the old boatyard just past the lighthouse." The next morning, armed with a sketch of her dream shelves and a hopeful heart, Elara set off in search of Finn O'Connell. The path to the boatyard wound past quaint cottages with overflowing window boxes, then opened onto a stretch of pebbled beach where colorful fishing boats were pulled high on the sand. The air grew richer with the scent of tar and sawdust. She found the workshop tucked behind a cluster of gnarled cypress trees, a sturdy, unassuming building with a wide-open door. Inside, the rhythmic scrape of wood on wood and the sweet, earthy smell of freshly cut timber hung heavy in the air. Sunlight streamed through a high window, illuminating sawdust motes dancing like miniature galaxies. A man was bent over a workbench, his back to her, deeply engrossed in his work. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his dark hair was dusted with wood shavings catching the light like flecks of gold. He wore a faded denim shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, corded with muscle. His hands, she noticed, were large and capable, moving with a practiced grace as he planed a long piece of timber. Elara hesitated, feeling a sudden shyness. She cleared her throat softly. The man straightened slowly, turning. He was even taller than she'd first thought. His eyes, a startling shade of sea green, met hers. They held a quiet intensity, a depth that made her breath catch. A faint scar, thin as a whisper, traced a line just above his left eyebrow, adding a touch of ruggedness to an otherwise handsome face. "Can I help you?" His voice was low, a smooth rumble, like the distant surf. "Oh yes, I hope so." Elara felt a blush creep up her neck. "My name is Elara Vance. I just bought the old salty Siren cottage down by the harbor. I'm hoping to turn it into a bookstore, the Binding Tide." A flicker of something, recognition, approval, crossed his face. The old Vance place, then. "Vance?" Elara frowned slightly. "No, I'm Elara Vance. I just bought it. It was the salty Siren before." He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Apologies. The old owner, Mrs. Albright, she called it that. Before her, it was the Vance families. Went back generations, they did. Figured you were family, come back." "Oh," Elara said, feeling a warmth spread through her. "No, just a new arrival. But it's nice to know it has history." She held out her sketches. "I was told you were the best carpenter in town, Mr. O'Connell. I need quite a bit of work done, especially some custom shelving for the bookstore, and that shed, well, it needs to stop leaning." He took the sketches, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The contact sent a tiny, unexpected shiver down her arm. His gaze lingered on her drawings, his brow furrowing in concentration. He didn't speak for a long moment, simply studying the plans. Elara watched him, suddenly aware of the way the light caught the strong line of his jaw, the subtle flex of his muscles as he held the paper. "These are good," he finally murmured, his gaze still on the paper. "Well, thought out?" He looked up, his sea-green eyes meeting hers again, a hint of appreciation in their depths. "Finn, please, and yes, Miss Vance, I can certainly help you make the Binding Tide take shape. That shed, though," he paused, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, "it might take more than just a little convincing." Elara laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that surprised even herself. "I had a feeling. It looks like it's been holding its breath for a century." "Something like that," Finn said, a faint smile softening the edges of his mouth. "Tell you what, I'll swing by your place this afternoon, take a proper look, give you an estimate." "That would be wonderful, Finn. Thank you." As Elara walked back through the winding streets of Oakhaven, the salty air felt fresher, the sunlight brighter. A small, fluttering hope had taken root in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. It wasn't just about the bookstore anymore. It was about the quiet strength in Finn's hands, the unexpected depth in his eyes, and the low rumble of his voice that seemed to resonate deep within her. True to his word, Finn arrived that afternoon. Elara had spent the morning clearing more dust, trying to imagine the empty space filled with books and the hum of quiet conversation. When his knock came, a solid, confident rap on the old door, she found herself smoothing her hair unnecessarily. He stepped inside, his presence filling the space with a quiet authority. He moved with a purpose, his sea-green eyes sweeping over the high ceilings, the sagging floorboards, the precarious shed. He ran a hand over the rough-hewn beams, his fingers tracing the grain of the old wood. "Good bones," he mused, more to himself than to her. "But she's tired." Elara watched him, fascinated. He wasn't just looking at the structure. He was feeling it, understanding its history, its whispers. He spoke about wood types, about structural integrity, about the way the sea air could erode even the strongest foundations. His passion for his craft was evident in every word, every gesture. "These shelves," he said, turning back to her sketches. "Exactly," Elara exclaimed, delighted that he understood. "I want them to feel warm, inviting, like they're just waiting for a story to be placed upon them." He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I've got some reclaimed oak down at the workshop, from an old barn up in the hills. Been seasoning for years. Could be perfect. Give it that aged character you're looking for." They spent the next hour walking through the cottage, discussing possibilities. He patiently explained the work that would be involved, breaking down the overwhelming task into manageable steps. He pointed out details Elara had missed, like the way the light fell through a specific window at sunset, suggesting a built-in bench there, or the perfect spot for a small wood-burning stove to create a cozy reading corner. When they finally stood in the leaning shed, Finn examined its precarious angle with a critical eye. "This one," he said, a hint of challenge in his voice. He met her gaze, a spark of determination in his eyes. "We'll get her standing proud again, Alara." Hearing him say her name, so easily, so naturally, sent another warmth through her. It wasn't just a business transaction. It felt like a collaboration, a shared vision. He saw the potential not just in the building, but in her dream. Before he left, he gave her a rough estimate, surprisingly reasonable given the scope of work. "I can start next week," he offered. "I'll need to order some materials, but I can begin with the shed, get that stabilized." "Next week would be wonderful," Alara said, her voice bright with gratitude. "Thank you, Finn." He paused at the door, his hand on the weathered frame. "It's a good dream, Alara. A bookstore for Oakhaven. It'll be a fine addition." With that, he was gone, leaving Alara alone in the quiet cottage, now filled with a different kind of silence. A hopeful silence. A silence that hummed with the promise of sawdust and new beginnings. The following days felt longer, filled with a new anticipation. Alara continued to clean, paint, and plan, but her thoughts often drifted to Finn. She found herself wondering about him, his life, his quiet passions. He carried an air of self-sufficiency, of a man deeply connected to his craft and his surroundings. She pictured him in his workshop, his hands shaping wood, his gaze steady and focused. One afternoon, while sifting through a forgotten corner of the cottage, tucked behind a loose floorboard, Alara found a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle and yellowed, filled with elegant, looping script. It appeared to be a diary, dating back to the late 1800s, belonging to a young woman named Clara Vance. Alara's heart gave a little jolt. Vance de Wayle. The name Finn had mentioned. Was this the family he'd spoken of? She carefully opened the journal, the scent of aged paper and dried flowers wafting up. The first entry she read spoke of the sea, of longing, and of the quiet beauty of Oakhaven. October 14, 1892, Alara read aloud, her voice soft in the empty room. "The autumn gales sing through the eaves tonight, a mournful tune that whispers of journeys far and wide. Papa says the fishing will be good this season, but my heart yearns for stories, not fish. I often sit by the window watching the ships depart, wondering what tales they carry from beyond the horizon. Oh, to fill this little cottage with the adventures of 1,000 lives, bound in paper and ink." A shiver traced its way down Alara's spine. Clara Vance over a century ago had dreamt a dream so startlingly similar to her own. It felt like a sign, a whisper from the past encouraging her forward. She sat on the dusty floor, lost in the faded words, feeling a profound connection to the woman who had lived and dreamt within these very walls. When Finn arrived the following Monday morning, his truck loaded with tools and planks of aged oak, Alara greeted him with a wide smile, the journal clutched in her hand. "Good morning, Finn," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "You won't believe what I've found." He looked at the journal, then at her, his sea-green eyes holding a question. "Looks like quite a treasure." "It is," Alara agreed, holding it out. "It belonged to a Clara Vance from the late 1800s. She lived here, in this cottage, and she dreamt of having a place filled with stories, just like I do." Finn took the journal carefully, his large fingers gentle on the delicate leather. He flipped through a few pages, his gaze softening as he read a snippet here and there. "Clara Vance," he murmured. "Yes, I know of the family. My great-grandfather, he used to tell stories of the Vances. They were dreamers," he said, "always looking beyond the horizon." He handed the journal back to her, a thoughtful expression on his face. Perhaps she's still here in a way, whispering her dreams into the wind, waiting for someone to hear them. Alara felt a lump form in her throat. He understood. He truly understood the magic of it all, the invisible threads that connected past and present. "Maybe she is," Alara whispered, "and maybe she's found a kindred spirit in me." Finn offered her a rare full smile then, a genuine warmth radiating from him that made her heart skip. "And in this cottage too. We'll make her proud, Alara. We'll make sure her whispers are heard." He spent the rest of the day in the shed, a symphony of hammering, sawing, and low muttered words floating through the cottage. Alara worked alongside him, sometimes holding a plank, sometimes simply watching, mesmerized by his quiet efficiency. He moved with a practiced ease, his movements economical and strong. By late afternoon, the shed no longer looked like it was contemplating collapse. It stood straighter, firmer, its old timbers reinforced with new, strong beams. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Finn wiped his hands on a rag. "That's the worst of it for today," he said, a faint smudge of dirt on his cheek. "She's good and solid now. We can start on the interior next." "It looks amazing, Finn," Alara said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "Thank you. You're truly talented." He shrugged, a hint of shyness in his eyes. "Just doing my job." Though this one, he gestured to the now stable shed. This one had a good fight in it. He gathered his tools, his movements unhurried. Alara watched him, a comfortable silence settling between them, a silence that felt less empty and more like a shared breath. The air was cool now, carrying the faint scent of Finn's wood and the ever-present whisper of the sea. As he was about to leave, Alara impulsively asked, "Would you like some dinner, Finn? I was just about to make some soup. Nothing fancy, but it's warm." He paused, his hand on the doorframe, those sea-green eyes meeting hers again. She saw a flicker of surprise, then something else, a quiet consideration. "That's kind of you, Alara, but I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing at all," she insisted, a little more boldly than she intended. "You've worked hard all day, and I have a lot of soup." She offered him a small, hopeful smile. He looked around the empty cottage, then back at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "All right, Alara, soup sounds good. Just let me put these tools away." Alara's heart gave a little leap. As he walked back to his truck, she hurried to her small makeshift kitchen, a flurry of warmth blooming in her chest. The cottage, which had felt so empty and full of dust just a week ago, was slowly, beautifully, beginning to fill with something else entirely. The whispers of the past were being joined by the quiet murmurs of a new beginning, a new hope, and the unexpected promise of shared soup on a cool Oakhaven evening. Alara's heart gave a little leap. As he walked back to his truck, she hurried to her small makeshift kitchen, a flurry of warmth blooming in her chest. The cottage, which had felt so empty and full of dust just a week ago, was slowly, beautifully beginning to fill with something else entirely. The whispers of the past were being joined by the quiet murmurs of a new beginning, a new hope, and the unexpected promise of shared soup on a cool Oakhaven evening. She moved with an almost frantic energy, pulling out the two mismatched bowls she'd unearthed from a dusty box, finding two equally mismatched spoons. The small, portable stovetop hummed, keeping the creamy pumpkin and ginger soup warm. She'd made it simple, knowing she wouldn't have many ingredients, but the scent that now filled the air was rich and inviting. A small wobbly table, once a forgotten garden piece, served as her dining area, pushed against the only window that wasn't boarded up. She wiped it clean with a damp cloth, then placed a single slightly bruised apple and a bottle of water on it, the closest she had to a centerpiece. Just as she finished, a soft knock echoed through the cottage. Alara's breath caught a nervous flutter in her stomach. He was here. She smoothed down her worn sweater, feeling suddenly self-conscious, then opened the door. Liam stood on the small porch, a faint smile playing on his lips. He'd washed his hands and his dark hair, though still a little tousled, looked fresh. "Smells incredible in here," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. He held a small, brown paper bag. "Brought some bread. Hope that's all right." "More than all right," Alara managed, stepping aside. "Please, come in." He walked in, his presence immediately filling the small space, not with overwhelming size, but with a quiet, comforting strength. He placed the bag on the table, revealing a crusty loaf of artisanal sourdough. "From Mrs. Gable's bakery down the road. Best in Oakhaven." "It looks amazing," Alara said, genuinely impressed. She'd only seen the small general store, not the specialized shops. "I'm afraid I only have water, though." Liam chuckled softly. "Water's perfect. It's the company that counts." His eyes met hers, and Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't been in a long time. They sat down at the tiny table, knees almost brushing. Elara ladled the thick orange soup into the bowls, the steam warming her face. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but rather a comfortable, anticipatory quiet. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the stovetop and the distant chirping of crickets. Liam took a spoonful, his brow furrowing slightly in concentration, then his eyes widened. Wow, this is phenomenal, Elara. What's in it? Elara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Just pumpkin, ginger, a hint of nutmeg, and a touch of cream. My grandmother's recipe, actually. Your grandmother was a wise woman, he said, taking another hearty spoonful. He tore off a piece of the sourdough, dipped it into the soup, and sighed contentedly. This is exactly what I needed after wrestling with those old pipes all day. It's the least I could do, Elara replied, stirring her own soup. You've been a lifesaver, Liam. I honestly don't know how I would have managed without you. He shrugged, a modest tilt of his head. Just doing what needs to be done. This old place has been sitting empty for too long. It's good to see it getting some love. He looked around the small, sparsely furnished room. You've already made a big difference in here, just by being present. Elara smiled, a genuine, easy smile that felt unfamiliar yet welcome. It's a slow process. I have so many plans, but it's a bit overwhelming. She gestured vaguely towards the wall where she envisioned her studio. I want to turn this into a proper art space. I'm an artist, you see, or I used to be. The last part came out quieter than she intended, a ghost of a past pain. Liam's gaze softened. Used to be? What kind of art? Painting, she clarified, taking a sip of water. Landscapes, mostly. And portraits sometimes. But life got in the way, I suppose. Oakhaven feels like a good place to rediscover it. She didn't elaborate on how life got in the way. Not yet. The wounds were still too fresh. Oakhaven has a way of doing that, Liam said thoughtfully. It's a place where things slow down, where you can hear yourself think again. My family's been here for generations. My grandfather built most of the houses on this side of town, including this one actually. Elara's eyes widened. Really? That's incredible. So you know this place inside out? Pretty much, he confirmed, a nostalgic glint in his eyes. Spent my summers as a kid running through these woods, exploring all the old properties. This cottage, it always had a certain charm, even when it was falling apart. He paused, looking at her. It's fitting that someone with an artist's eye found it. They continued to eat, the conversation flowing easily between them, punctuated by comfortable silences. Elara found herself telling him about her initial trepidation about Oakhaven, how isolated it felt, but also how the quiet beauty was slowly winning her over. She spoke of her vision for the cottage, not just as a home, but as a sanctuary where she could create again. Liam, in turn, shared stories of Oakhaven, its quirky residents, the annual harvest festival, the hidden trails in the surrounding forest. He spoke of his work, not just as a handyman, but as someone who took pride in preserving the history and integrity of the old homes. He had a deep respect for the land and the community, a grounding presence that Elara found incredibly appealing. It sounds like a wonderful place, Elara mused, finishing her soup. So different from where I came from. She hesitated, then decided to offer a tiny glimpse into her recent past. I needed a change, a complete break from everything familiar. My life in the city had become complicated and rather gray. She looked down at her empty bowl. I needed color again. Liam listened intently, his gaze unwavering, full of quiet understanding. Gray can be a tough color to shake, he said softly. But Oakhaven has plenty of greens and blues, and if you're looking for color, I know a spot in the woods where the wildflowers bloom like crazy in spring. It's a riot of purples and yellows. A warmth spread through Elara's chest, not from the soup this time, but from his words. It wasn't pity she saw in his eyes, but a gentle invitation, a promise of beauty. I'd like that very much, she whispered, meeting his gaze. They talked for another hour, the light outside gradually fading, casting long, soft shadows across the room. Elara learned that Liam had a younger sister who lived a few towns over, a teacher, and that his parents still lived in the house his grandfather built, just a mile down the road. He was close to his family, a detail that resonated deeply with Elara, who had always valued family above all else, even if hers were now scattered. He asked her about her favorite artists, and Ilara found herself animatedly describing the works of Georgia O'Keeffe and Vincent van Gogh, their bold use of color and emotional depth. Liam listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed he wasn't just being polite, but truly engaged. He didn't pretend to be an art expert, but he appreciated her passion. "You have a real spark when you talk about painting," he observed, a slight smile playing on his lips. "It's like you light up from the inside." Ilara felt that familiar blush return. It's been a while since I allowed myself to feel that spark," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "After everything, I just put it away, like a broken toy." "It's never too late to pick it up again," Liam said, his voice gentle but firm. "Especially when it clearly means so much to you. This cottage, it feels like a place where you can mend things, doesn't it?" "It does," she agreed, looking around the small room with new eyes. The dust and disrepair still lingered, but now, tinged with the golden hour light and Liam's comforting presence, it felt less like a burden and more like a canvas, waiting for her to bring it to life. As the last sliver of daylight vanished, Liam rose to clear the table. "Let me help with these." "Oh, you don't have to," Ilara protested, but he was already gathering the bowls. "Nonsense. Fair's fair. You cooked, I can clean." He carried them to her small sink, which, thankfully, was now fully functional thanks to his earlier efforts. He ran the water, the sound surprisingly loud in the quiet cottage, and began to wash the dishes with a practiced ease. Ilara watched him, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. It had been so long since anyone had done such a simple domestic thing for her, without expectation or complaint. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes of his kindness, his unassuming nature. She found herself drawn to these quiet gestures, these moments of shared normalcy that felt like healing balm to her weary soul. "Thank you, Liam," she said softly, leaning against the doorframe of the makeshift kitchen. He glanced over his shoulder, a warm smile on his face. "Anytime, Ilara." He finished washing, dried his hands on a cloth she offered, and then turned to her. The small space felt suddenly smaller, the air charged with an unspoken understanding. "I should probably head out," he said, though he made no move to leave. "Still have a few things to sort before morning." Ilara's heart sank a little at the thought of him leaving. The cottage would feel so empty again. "Right, of course. Thank you again for everything. For the pipes, for the bread, for the company." "My pleasure," he replied, his eyes lingering on hers. "I can come by tomorrow morning if you like, and take a look at that leaky roof section. Might be a quick fix, or at least a temporary patch until we can get proper materials." "That would be wonderful," Ilara said, her voice a little breathless. The prospect of seeing him again so soon sent a surprising jolt of anticipation through her. He nodded, then hesitated, his gaze dropping to her hands, then back to her eyes. "Get some rest, Ilara. It's been a long week for you." "You too," she returned. He took a step towards the door, then paused, turning back. "Oh, and Ilara?" "Yes. That gray you mentioned? I think it's already started to fade." He offered another one of his gentle, reassuring smiles, then opened the door and stepped out into the deepening twilight. Ilara stood there for a long moment, the cool evening air drifting in through the open door, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine. She watched until the taillights of his truck disappeared down the gravel path, leaving her in the sudden, profound quiet of the cottage. But it wasn't empty anymore. Not truly. The scent of pumpkin and ginger still lingered, mingling with the fresh smell of sourdough. The warmth of their shared conversation still hummed in the air. She ran a hand over the surface of the small table, remembering his quiet attentiveness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. He was a man of few words, but his presence was powerful, steady, and utterly comforting. She moved slowly, tidying the few things they'd used, then found herself drawn to the window. Outside, the Oakhaven night was dark, but the stars were beginning to emerge, pinpricks of light in the inky sky. The cottage, which had felt like a fortress against a painful past, now felt like a hopeful beacon for a brighter future. Liam's words echoed in her mind. "That gray you mentioned? I think it's already started to fade." She touched her cheek, a faint smile gracing her lips. Maybe he was right. Maybe Oakhaven, and the unexpected kindness of its quiet handyman, was exactly what she needed to find her colors again. She pulled out her old sketchbook, a forgotten friend, and a pencil. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt an itch, a gentle stirring of inspiration. She didn't sketch anything specific, just lines and shapes, letting her hand rediscover the rhythm. It felt good, a small act of rebellion against the inertia that had gripped her for so long. Eventually, she put the sketchbook away, a sense of peace settling over her. She blew out the candle she'd lit, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint glow of the moon filtering through the window. She curled up on her makeshift bed, the old sleeping bag feeling surprisingly cozy. Thoughts of Liam, of his quiet strength and reassuring presence, were the last things in her mind as she drifted off to sleep, a soft, hopeful smile on her face. The next morning, Alara woke with a lightness she hadn't felt in months. The sun, a pale gold, streamed through the unboarded window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She made herself a cup of instant coffee, savoring the warmth, and then, with a renewed sense of purpose, began to tackle the next small project, clearing out the accumulated clutter in what she hoped would become her studio. She found old newspapers, rusty tools, forgotten gardening implements, and a surprising number of bird nests, long abandoned. It was dirty work, but as she cleared each item, she felt a corresponding lightness within herself. It was as if she was clearing out not just the cottage's past, but her own. Around mid-morning, just as she was contemplating a well-deserved break, she heard the familiar rumble of a truck on the gravel path. Her heart gave a little flutter. Liam. She hurried to the door, pulling back the heavy tarp that still served as her makeshift curtain. He was there, stepping out of his truck, a toolbox in hand. He wore a different shirt today, a faded blue plaid, but the same quiet confidence. "Morning, Alara," he greeted, his smile warm. "Ready to tackle that roof?" "As I'll ever be," she replied, a genuine laugh bubbling up. "Coffee's on if you want some." "Sounds perfect," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He walked towards her, and Alara noticed the easy way he moved, the strength in his stride. He looked around the now partially cleared room. "Looks like you've been busy." "Just trying to make some space," she said, gesturing to the piles of debris she'd moved outside. "It's a bigger job than I thought, but it feels good to get my hands dirty." "That's the Oakhaven spirit," Liam observed. He set his toolbox down. "All right, let's see about this roof. I'll need a ladder. Do you have one, or should I grab mine from the truck?" "I have a rickety old one in the shed," Alara admitted, wincing slightly. "Probably not up to code." Liam chuckled. "Probably not. I'll use mine. Stay clear of the ladder when I'm up there just in case." He retrieved a sturdy aluminum ladder from his truck, a professional piece of equipment. Alara watched him, admiring his competence, the way he effortlessly assessed the situation. He was a man who knew his craft, a man who built and repaired, bringing order to chaos. It was a stark contrast to her own world of ethereal colors and abstract ideas, yet she found herself drawn to his practicality. He carefully positioned the ladder against the side of the cottage, directly under the stained patch on the ceiling Alara had pointed out. "Just a small section of flashing that's come loose, looks like," he called down as he ascended, his voice calm and reassuring. "Should be an easy fix. I've got some sealant and a few spare shingles in my truck that'll do the trick." Alara stood below, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known she was missing. The rhythmic sounds of Liam working, the gentle scrape of a tool, the soft thud of a shingle being adjusted, filled the morning air. The cottage, with him on its roof, felt less like a relic of the past and more like a home being lovingly restored. She found herself humming a tuneless melody, a quiet contentment settling deep within her. The whispers of the past were still there, but now they were being gently overlaid by the steady, comforting rhythm of the present. And the promise of a future, slowly, beautifully, beginning to take shape. The sun climbed higher, warming Alara's face as she watched Liam. His silhouette against the brightening sky was strong, capable, and undeniably appealing. She imagined the scent of wood and sawdust clinging to him, a clean, earthy smell that would soon become synonymous with this place, with him. A little while later, the rhythmic scrape of a ladder against the side of the cottage announced his descent. He moved with an easy grace, his muscles flexing beneath the worn fabric of his work shirt. "Morning?" he called, his voice a low rumble that reached her even before he stepped onto the dew-kissed grass. There was a smudge of dirt on his cheek, a stray lock of dark hair falling across his forehead, giving him a boyish charm that belied the focused intensity she'd seen in his eyes moments before. "Morning," Alara replied, a genuine smile curving her lips. "Coffee's ready, and I might have found some eggs." She gestured towards a small, surprisingly well-stocked kitchen she'd discovered. Liam's eyes lit up. "Eggs? Now that's a luxury I wasn't expecting." He wiped his hands on his trousers, a self-conscious gesture, before following her inside. The cottage, though still echoing with signs of its long slumber, felt different now. The scent of fresh coffee, the quiet sizzle of butter in a pan, the soft clink of ceramic mugs, these were the sounds and smells of life returning. They ate at a small, sturdy wooden table in the kitchen, the morning light streaming through the newly cleaned window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Liam devoured his scrambled eggs with an almost boyish enthusiasm, occasionally catching her eye and offering a sheepish grin. Alara found herself watching him, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't just his handsome features or his strength, it was the way he approached everything with a calm, steady determination, the genuine kindness in his eyes, the subtle humor that flickered in his expressions. "Roof's coming along," he said between bites, his voice thoughtful. "Found a few more soft spots than I'd hoped, but nothing we can't handle." He met her gaze, and for a moment, the "we" hung in the air, a soft, unspoken invitation. "We?" she asked gently, a playful arch to her brow. He chuckled, a rich, warm sound. "Well, someone has to hand me the tools, right? And keep the coffee flowing." His eyes twinkled. "Besides, I could use a second opinion on the aesthetic choices. You have a good eye for that sort of thing, I can tell." Alara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I do enjoy making things beautiful," she admitted, her gaze drifting around the rustic kitchen. "This place has good bones, Liam. It just needs a little love." "A lot of love," he corrected, his voice softer now. "And patience. And a fair bit of elbow grease." He pushed his plate aside, leaning back in his chair, his gaze lingering on her. "What about you, Alara? What brings you all the way out here to the middle of nowhere?" His question was direct but gentle, devoid of prying. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. I needed a change, a complete reset. My life in the city had become suffocating. I felt like I was losing myself, chasing things that didn't truly matter." She paused, searching for the right words. This cottage, this place, it felt like a calling, a chance to reconnect with something real. She didn't mention the vague, unsettling feeling of being lost, the quiet ache of loneliness that had prompted her impulsive journey. Not yet. Liam listened intently, his gaze unwavering, making her feel seen, understood, without needing to say more. "I know that feeling," he said, his voice quiet, almost reflective. "The city can do that to you, chew you up and spit you out, if you're not careful." He ran a thumb along the rim of his coffee mug. "My story's not so different. Spent years building a successful construction business, always chasing the next big project. Woke up one day and realized I hadn't built anything for myself, anything that truly mattered." He shrugged, a faint, almost imperceptible shadow crossing his face. "So I sold up, bought a truck, and started looking for a different kind of project. Something with soul." He looked around the cottage, a slow smile spreading. "Found it here." Their shared vulnerability created a delicate bridge between them, a silent understanding passing between their eyes. It felt like they were both refugees from a different life, finding solace and purpose in the quiet solitude of this forgotten place. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Alara found herself drawn into the restoration process with an unexpected eagerness. She discovered a surprising aptitude for sanding old wood, her hands growing accustomed to the coarse grit, revealing the rich grain beneath layers of paint and varnish. She learned to mix paint, to meticulously clean old window panes until they sparkled, to carefully remove decades of grime from forgotten corners. Liam was a patient teacher, his instructions clear and concise, his praise genuine. He'd show her how to hold a chisel, explain the properties of different types of wood, or detail the structural integrity of the cottage's ancient beams. He never made her feel inept, even when she fumbled, only offered encouragement and a steady hand. Moments often arose where their hands would brush, or he'd lean close to point something out, and a spark, soft but undeniable, would pass between them. Elara would feel a warmth spread through her, a pleasant flutter in her stomach, and she'd find herself stealing glances at him when he wasn't looking, admiring the focused intensity in his eyes, the strength in his arms, the gentle curve of his smile. One afternoon, while Liam was patching a section of the roof, Elara was inside, carefully stripping wallpaper from what would eventually become the living room. The paper, a faded floral pattern from an era long past, peeled away in stubborn strips, revealing layers of history beneath. She worked methodically, the quiet scrape of her scraper. Against the plaster, a soothing sound. She imagined the lives that had unfolded within these walls, the laughter, the tears, the whispered secrets. Find anything interesting? Liam's voice, muffled by the ceiling, made her jump. She grinned, looking up at the faint bulge in the ceiling that marked his position. Just a lot of very old glue, and a surprisingly resilient shade of avocado green paint. A laugh rumbled from above. Sounds about right for a house this age. A few moments later, as she peeled back a particularly stubborn section, a small brittle piece of paper fluttered to the floor. She knelt, picking it up gently. It was a faded photograph, black and white, depicting a young woman with kind eyes and a shy smile, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. On the back, in elegant, looping script, were the words, E.A. Pfaff, my dear Eleanor, June 1942. Elara's breath hitched. Liam, she called, her voice soft with wonder. I think I found something. He was down the ladder in a flash, his boots thudding softly on the wooden floor. He took the photograph from her, his brow furrowing as he studied it. Wow, he murmured, his thumb gently tracing the faded image. Eleanor, this must have been her cottage, or at least someone who lived here. June 1942, Elara mused. During the war. Imagine the stories she must have had. She looked around the bare room, suddenly seeing it through Eleanor's eyes, imagining her life unfolding here. The cottage felt even more alive now, imbued with a tangible piece of its past. Liam carefully placed the photograph on the mantelpiece of the fireplace they were restoring, a silent tribute to its former inhabitant. We'll have to find out more about Eleanor, he said, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Give her a proper place in this story. He glanced at Elara, a soft smile playing on his lips. Our story, I mean. The unspoken words hung in the air, a gentle promise, a shared future intertwined with the past. That evening, they cooked dinner together, a simple meal of pasta and fresh vegetables from a local farm stand Liam had discovered. The kitchen, with its newly cleaned surfaces and the aroma of garlic and herbs, felt warm and inviting. Elara found herself humming again, a different tune this time, a melody of contentment. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, moving from the day's progress on the cottage to broader topics, books they'd read, places they'd traveled, dreams they harbored. Elara learned about Liam's love for old classic cars and his secret ambition to build a boat from scratch one day. He learned about her passion for photography and her quiet longing to capture the beauty in everyday moments, a longing she hadn't pursued in her old life. You should get your camera out, Liam encouraged, his eyes earnest. This place is full of those moments. The light through the trees in the morning, the way the dust motes dance, the texture of the old wood. He gestured around them. Even the way we're bringing it back to life. His words resonated deeply with her. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed holding a camera, framing a shot, seeing the world through a lens. Maybe I will, she said, a sense of renewed purpose stirring within her. Thank you, Liam. He simply smiled, a quiet, understanding smile that made her heart skip a beat. Later, as darkness settled over the valley, they sat on the newly installed porch swing, a temporary structure Liam had put up. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. A blanket lay across their laps, a shared warmth against the evening chill. Above them, the stars began to pepper the inky sky, far brighter and more numerous than any she had seen in the city. It's beautiful out here, Elara whispered, leaning her head back against the rough wood of the cottage wall. It is, Liam agreed, his voice a low murmur beside her. He shifted slightly, and his arm, warm and solid, brushed hers. The contact was electric, a small jolt that went straight to her core. She didn't pull away. They sat in comfortable silence, the only sounds the distant hoot of an owl and the gentle creak of the swing. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken thoughts, shared feelings, and the quiet hum of two souls slowly, beautifully, finding their rhythm together. After a long while, Liam spoke again, his voice soft. You know, when I first saw this place, it was just a shell, broken, forgotten. I didn't think I'd ever feel this here. This? Elara prompted gently, her voice barely a whisper. He turned his head slightly, and she could feel his gaze on her, even in the dim light. This sense of home, he clarified. Of belonging. I thought I was just building a house, but it feels like something more, like I'm building a life, a future. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Elara's heart swelled. She understood completely. This cottage, this quiet corner of the world, was indeed becoming a home, not just for the structure itself, but for the burgeoning dreams within its walls. And Liam, with his quiet strength and gentle spirit, was inextricably linked to that feeling. The next few weeks were a blur of activity and growing intimacy. The cottage transformed at a steady pace. The roof was completed, its new shingles gleaming softly in the sun. Inside, rooms took on definition. Walls were painted in soft, warm hues, floors sanded and sealed, windows trimmed. Elara discovered a knack for finding discarded treasures at local antique shops and flea markets. A charming old dresser, a set of mismatched chairs, a vintage lamp that added character and warmth to the emerging spaces. Each piece had a story, and she loved imagining them being given a new life here. Liam in turn discovered her intuitive eye for design and trusted her judgment implicitly. He would often pause, hammer in hand, and ask, "What do you think, Elara?" It wasn't just a question, it was an invitation, a gesture of shared ownership and partnership. One particularly sunny afternoon, while they were installing the last window in the main bedroom, a room that overlooked a field of wild poppies, Elara found herself standing on a small ladder, trying to adjust a stubborn latch. Liam was below, holding the frame steady. Her fingers fumbled, and she let out a small sigh of frustration. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Just this one last bit," she muttered, reaching again. But her foot slipped slightly on the rung. Before she could gasp, Liam's strong hands were at her waist, steadying her. He held her there for a moment, his touch firm and reassuring. Her breath hitched. She could feel the warmth of his hands through her shirt, the strength of his grip, and the scent of him. Sawdust, sweat, and something uniquely Liam filled her senses. She looked down, her eyes meeting his. His gaze was intense, full of a quiet warmth that sent a shiver down her spine. The air between them crackled with an unspoken energy. His thumbs gently stroked her sides, a feather-light touch that left her breathless. Time seemed to stop, suspended in that small, intimate space. "Careful there," he murmured, his voice a little rougher than usual. I'm fine," she managed, her voice a whisper. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt a pull, an undeniable magnetic force drawing her closer. She wanted to lean into his touch, to feel his arms fully around her. He slowly loosened his grip, but his eyes never left hers. A slow, tender smile spread across his face, and for a moment, she thought he might lean in, might kiss her. The anticipation was exquisite, a sweet ache in her chest. But he simply stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. "All right, let's get that latch sorted," he said, his voice returning to its normal calm tone, though his eyes still held a lingering intensity. Elara felt a pang of both disappointment and relief. It wasn't time yet, she realized. But the moment had shifted something between them. An unspoken acknowledgement of the growing attraction, a promise of what might be. That evening the air was thick with unspoken emotions. They ate dinner in the almost finished kitchen, the setting sun casting long shadows through the new windows. Elara found herself more aware of Liam than ever before, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the way he chewed thoughtfully, the strong line of his jaw. Every glance, every shared smile, felt charged with a new significance. After dinner, they decided to take a walk around the property. The cottage sat on a gentle slope, surrounded by a small orchard of gnarled apple trees and a sprawling meadow now dotted with wildflowers. A narrow, winding path led down to a small stream that gurgled softly over smooth stones. They walked in comfortable silence, the sounds of nature surrounding them. The air was soft, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth. As they reached the stream, Liam stopped, picking up a smooth, flat skipping stone. He tossed it expertly across the water, watching as it bounced 3 times before sinking. "My grandfather taught me that," he said, a nostalgic smile touching his lips. "He used to say, 'Every stone has a story, Liam. You just have to know how to listen.'" Alara sat on a moss-covered boulder, watching him. "What's your story, Liam?" she asked softly, her gaze on his profile. He sighed, a long, thoughtful breath. "It's complicated, I suppose. My parents were wonderful, salt-of-the-earth people. But they were always pushing me to achieve, to be successful, to build something grand." He paused, looking out at the water. "I did. I built a big company, made a lot of money, but I felt empty, like I was performing a role, not living a life." He turned to her, his eyes earnest in the fading light. "My last relationship, it fell apart because I was never truly present, always thinking about the next deadline, the next project. She deserved more than that." A shadow of regret crossed his face. "I promised myself I wouldn't make that mistake again." Elara's heart ached for him. She saw the vulnerability beneath his strong, capable exterior. "It takes courage to admit that," she said, her voice gentle. "To step away from what everyone expects and build something for yourself." He offered a small, self-deprecating smile. "And what about you, Elara? What was suffocating you in the city?" She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs. "It was a slow drain, really. A feeling of constant comparison, of never being enough. I was a marketing executive, always chasing trends, creating images that felt hollow. And my own relationships, they were superficial. Always about appearances, never about true connection." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "I realized I'd lost touch with who I was, what truly made me happy. I needed to find a place where I could breathe, where I could be real." "You're real, Alara," Liam said, his voice firm, his eyes holding hers with an intense sincerity that made her chest tighten. "More real than anyone I've met in a long time." His words were a balm to her soul, a profound validation. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on the boulder. His touch was warm, comforting, and utterly grounding. "We both found our way here, didn't we?" he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "To this little corner of the world, to rebuild ourselves and this place." The stars had begun to emerge, painting the sky with diamond dust. The moon, a sliver of silver, cast a soft glow over the landscape. Elara felt a deep sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of coming home that transcended the physical structure of the cottage. It was a home in the presence of this man, in the shared space they were creating, in the honest vulnerability they had just exchanged. They walked back to the cottage hand in hand, the silence between them no longer filled with unspoken desires, but with a quiet, profound understanding. The air buzzed with a different kind of energy now, one of shared history, present comfort, and future possibilities. As they reached the porch, Liam paused, turning to face her. His hand still held hers, his thumb gently tracing circles on her skin. His eyes, dark and fathomless in the twilight, searched hers. "Elara," he began, his voice soft, almost a murmur. I feel something here. Something I haven't felt in a very long time." Her heart thrummed. "Me too, Liam," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "More than I ever thought possible." He took a step closer, closing the small distance between them. The scent of him, clean and earthy, filled her senses. He lifted his free hand, gently cupping her cheek, his touch sending a delicious shiver through her. His thumb stroked her skin, a tender, possessive gesture. "You're beautiful, Elara," he whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips. Her breath hitched. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. This was it. The moment they had been circling, the one that had been building with every shared glance, every soft touch, every quiet conversation. His lips met hers gently, tentatively at first, a soft press that sent a jolt of warmth through her entire being. It was a kiss of quiet discovery, of tender longing, of unspoken promises. She responded instantly, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, slowly, exquisitely, blooming like a wildflower in the gentle evening light. It was unhurried, heartfelt, a confirmation of everything that had been growing between them. It tasted of starlight and fresh air, of shared dreams and rediscovered hope. When they finally broke apart, it was with a soft sigh, their foreheads resting against each other. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his, which were dark with emotion. A small, shy smile played on her lips. "Wow," she breathed, the word a soft exhalation. He chuckled, a low, warm sound that vibrated through her. Wow, indeed. He didn't release her, his hands still cupping her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "This isn't just about restoring a cottage anymore, is it?" he murmured, his voice husky. "No," Alara agreed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's about so much more." They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, the quiet understanding that now permeated their shared space a tangible, comforting presence. The cottage, now almost complete, stood silent witness to their burgeoning love, its ancient walls holding the promise of new life, new dreams, and a future they were slowly, beautifully, beginning to build together, piece by precious piece. The following morning, a light rain began to fall, pattering softly on the newly shingled roof. It was a cozy sound, encouraging them to linger indoors. They spent the morning working on the interior, Liam installing the last of the kitchen cabinets, while Alara began to unpack boxes of her own belongings that had finally arrived from storage. Books, a few cherished heirlooms, her camera. She found her old Nikon, dusting it off with reverence. As Liam had suggested, the cottage was a treasure trove of photographic opportunities. She started with the details, the way the rain beaded on the window panes, the intricate grain of the old wooden floorboards, the vibrant color of a wildflower she'd brought inside and placed in a simple glass jar. Liam watched her, a quiet smile on his face. "See, I told you," he said, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "You have an eye for it." Alara looked up, her heart full. "I'd forgotten how much I loved this," she admitted, lowering the camera. "Thank you for reminding me." He pushed himself off the doorframe, walking towards her. "We all need reminders sometimes, don't we? Of who we are, what we love." He reached out, gently tucking a stray curl behind her ear. His touch was light, tender. "And sometimes, we need someone else to help us see it." She met his gaze, a quiet understanding passing between them. "And sometimes," she added, her voice soft, "we need someone to help us build a new path, even when we don't know where it's going." He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that reached his eyes. A new path, together. He paused, his gaze sweeping around the cottage. "The main structural work is done. The big repairs are behind us. Now it's about the finishing touches, the decorating, making it truly ours." He looked back at her, his eyes serious. "What do you say, Alara? Are you ready to make this place a home with me?" The question wasn't about a lease or a mortgage. It was about something far deeper, a commitment of hearts and spirits. Alara felt a wave of emotion wash over her, joy, relief, a profound sense of belonging. This man, this cottage, this quiet life. It was everything she hadn't known she was searching for. "Yes, Liam," she whispered, her voice thick with feeling. "More than ready." He reached for her, pulling her gently into his arms. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, feeling utterly safe and cherished. The rain continued its soft song outside, a peaceful melody accompanying their silent embrace. The cottage was no longer just a project, a place of restoration. It was a crucible, a sanctuary, a foundation. And their love, like the building itself, was being meticulously crafted, layer by beautiful layer, a masterpiece of shared purpose and growing affection, slowly, wonderfully becoming their forever home. The future, once a daunting, uncertain expanse, now stretched before them, inviting and full of promise, a canvas waiting for their shared dreams to be painted upon it. They spoke of sun-drenched mornings in a blooming garden, evenings curled by the newly installed fireplace, and the quiet patter of rain against the restored window panes, their voices weaving dreams into the very fabric of the cottage. Each shared vision solidified their bond, making their hearts beat in a harmonious rhythm. One crisp autumn evening, as the last piece of furniture found its place, and the scent of beeswax filled the air, he turned to her, his eyes reflecting the warm glow of the lamps. "This isn't just a house, is it?" he murmured, pulling her close. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "It's our beginning," she whispered, a tear of pure joy tracing a path down her cheek. He kissed her forehead, a promise in the gentle touch. Here, in their meticulously crafted haven, they knew, with a certainty that settled deep in their souls, that they had found not just a home, but a love that would endure, as timeless and beautiful as the cottage they had built together, brick by loving brick, heart by devoted heart, forever.